Sometimes the most appealing ideas in life are those that promise to simplify complex problems into a single, memorable formula. The easier it is to remember, especially when tied to specific numbers, the more compelling it is. One such example is the 7-38-55 rule, which we'll look at in this video. It's tempting to believe that science and psychology can provide definitive formulas for solving life's complexities. In reality, however, such rules often provide little more than a false sense of certainty. Take, for example, the widely popular 10,000-hour rule, which suggests that it takes exactly 10,000 hours of practice to master any skill. The idea that practice makes perfect has been ingrained in ambitious minds since ancient Rome. But the truth is, the 10,000-hour rule is largely a myth. No scientific study has ever definitively confirmed this claim. The concept originated in 1993, when researcher K. Anders Ericsson and his colleagues studied the relationship between practice time and elite performance. Malcolm Gladwell later popularized it in his best-selling book Outliers, arguing that true expertise requires at least 10,000 hours of conscious practice. Similarly, the 21-day rule suggests that it takes exactly 21 days to form or break a habit, a claim that lacks solid scientific basis. Then, there's the 80-20 principle, or the Pareto principle, which claims that 80% of the results come from just 20% of the causes. And now, we come to the widely accepted but often misunderstood concept of the 7-38-55 rule. But does this rule really hold up under scrutiny? Let's find out. What is the 7-38-55 rule? The 7-38-55 rule was introduced in the late 1960s by psychologist Albert Mehrabian, based on his research on communication. This principle suggests that only 7% of a message's meaning comes from the actual words used, while the remaining 93% is conveyed through tone of voice, 38%, and body language, 55%. But how did this formula come to be? To understand its origins, we need to take a closer look at Mehrabian's experiments. Mehrabian's research indicated that communication is largely nonverbal. In his first study, 30 female participants listened to words spoken in positive, neutral, or negative tones. Sometimes there was harmony between the words and the tone, like saying "thank you" in a warm, sincere voice. Other times, the tone contradicted the words, such as using a harsh, dismissive tone for a positive phrase. In a second experiment, 37 female participants were shown photos of people's faces expressing different emotions, like neutral or dislike, while simultaneously hearing a spoken word. Some of these visual and auditory cues aligned, while others clashed, forcing participants to interpret the true emotion behind the message. From these studies, Mehrabian concluded that when verbal and nonverbal cues conflict, people rely more on facial expressions and tone of voice than on the actual words being spoken. In essence, his research suggested that spoken words alone play a minimal role in conveying emotions and attitudes, accounting for only 7% of a message's impact. Despite its intriguing findings, Mehrabian's research didn't gain widespread attention at the time. However, over the years, his ideas were adopted, misinterpreted, and eventually turned into what we now call the 7-38-55 rule. Mehrabian later compiled his findings in the book Silent Messages, but by then, the rule had already evolved into an urban myth, deeply embedded in popular psychology, just like many other so-called communication formulas. What's wrong with the 7-38-55 rule? At first glance, the 7-38-55 rule may seem like a groundbreaking formula for mastering communication. However, when we take a closer look, several fundamental flaws emerge. First, the experimental design itself was flawed. Mehrabian's studies were conducted with a very small sample size, consisting exclusively of female participants. Moreover, his experiments only analyzed facial expressions and tone of voice, ignoring other crucial aspects of body language such as gestures or posture. Even more importantly, his findings were never tested outside a laboratory setting, meaning they may not hold up in real-world conversations. Even Dr. Albert Mehrabian himself believed his research had been misinterpreted. He never claimed that the 738-55 formula applies to all communication. Instead, he emphasized how people often send nonverbal messages without realizing it, coining the term implicit communication. Research does suggest that when verbal and nonverbal cues contradict each other, people tend to trust the nonverbal signals more. However, this does not mean that words are nearly irrelevant in communication. The problem is, debunking the 738-55 rule is much harder than spreading it, a classic example of Brandolini's law. As Italian programmer Alberto Brandolini pointed out, the amount of energy needed to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude greater than that needed to produce it. But let's put this to the test with a simple thought experiment. Imagine you're attending a lecture. Now picture that same lecture being delivered entirely through grunts, murmurs, facial expressions, and gestures, without any words at all. Would you still absorb 93% of the information? Probably not. This alone should make us rethink the credibility of the 738-55 rule. The verbal and nonverbal process of communication is important as a whole. Communication is a complex process where verbal and nonverbal elements work together to convey meaning. The attempt to quantify their importance, as seen in the widely cited 738-55 rule, oversimplifies human interaction. Every conversation takes place within a specific context, shaped by factors such as environment, speaker roles, backgrounds, and relationships. While the study of body language may seem like a modern concept, its roots go back centuries. One of the most influential works in this field was Charles Darwin's 1872 book, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals, which laid the foundation for later research on facial expressions, gestures, and emotional cues. The 738-55 rule is just one perspective in the vast field of communication studies, yet many so-called experts promote the idea that body language alone can uncover hidden truths. For example, if someone crosses their arms, it is often assumed that they are defensive or hiding something. If they avoid eye contact, they must be lying. However, real-life interactions are far more nuanced. A person might cross their arms simply because they are cold or feel comfortable, and they might avoid eye contact due to shyness, anxiety, or cultural reasons rather than deception. Mastering communication is not about quick tricks or magic formulas. Like any valuable skill, it requires curiosity, emotional intelligence, empathy, and genuine understanding. Building authentic connections takes time and practice. And as with most things in life, there is no instant shortcut to success. Thank you so much for watching and listening. The video is over. Goodbye.